hello, and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Christina Langdon. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Hi there. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. So let's jump right in and start with the question that I love asking people, which is, what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to making you who you became as a young adult, especially?
Hard work was probably number one. My first job was when I was 11 years old. I was washing dishes at an Italian restaurant in my hometown. So she had us working early. Hard work. My mother would always say, like, you write your own life script. So she very much was like, you get what you fight for, you work for. There was some scarcity around money as well. My mother was my parents were divorced when I was 11, and when we moved into our new house, my mother had this beautiful black and white picture book. It was one of those big $70 books that you'd buy at the Barnes and Noble now, and it was on our coffee table in our living room. And the name of it was The Bag Ladies of New York City. And so I think that that's where some of my money mindset came from as well. So hard work, perseverance, and make your own money.
So yes, we were talking in our pre-show conversation. I don't know if this came up, but my parents got divorced when I was 11 as well. So it's that age where you're in between, like you're not a kid, but you're learning about stuff, and it's really impressionable. I heard you say your mom taught you that you get what you fight for.
Yes.
So did you always feel like you had to fight for everything that you needed to have?
Yeah. I think that I felt like I was fighting for everything growing up, and I have a new relationship with that now. I think that's changed as I've done a lot of work. But I do think I felt like I was fighting. Some of it was survival because my mother worked very hard. My senior year in high school, she traveled 50 weeks out of the year. She would not the whole week, but so I kind of raised myself. So, I think there was a fighter in me, and I think that fighter has served me very, very well until it didn't.
Right.
And I've had to redefine that relationship between having the life I want without the fight. So it's a work in progress every day.
Yeah, right, exactly. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had an older sister who's 6 years older. I have an older sister who's 6 years older, and I have a younger brother who's 5 years younger. So we had some distance between us. So my sister was out of the house during my teenage years, and while my mother was traveling, I was really, the person in charge.
That's a lot for a young kid, a kid in high school who wants to have no responsibilities, and you had to.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of responsibility, but then I would say, the good part about it is it's what kind of defined who I was. I took responsibility very, very seriously at a young age and started creating the life that I wanted at a very young age. So some of it's really, really good, served me really well, and created the success in my life. And some of it was also very hard, but it really made me who I am.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that anything any of us have been through is to look back and go, I wish it had been different necessarily, because it did make us who we are. So then how did that outlook serve you or not serve you as you started getting into a career?
That's a really good question. So I worked really hard because I knew and I was driven that, to get what you want, you have to fight for it, just like we've talked about. So I graduated college. I went out and I got my first career. I wanted promotions. I was going to work very hard for what I wanted. I ended up getting the promotions. I worked for a public relations firm right out of school. And then I got to work for Time magazine. Then I went to work for Martha Stewart for 20 years. And there I had a successive rise in different titles. I was there for almost 20 years. I was associate publisher of her magazine, Martha Stewart Living, for many years. I was the publisher of Body and Soul magazine. I was also the publisher of Everyday Food. So I was leading the sales and marketing division of the company. And I was clawing. I was going up that corporate ladder, right? Hear me roar a little bit. And my last job in media was as the chief revenue officer at Fast Company. And so I had ended up in the C-suite. And I thought it was going to be easier. Like I wasn't going to have to fight so much.
Right. Well, after I get to the top, I don't have to fight as hard. Is that, yeah.
No, I really did think this should be easier. And so when I got there, I had all of these thoughts around, wow, this isn't what I expected. There was disappointment. Something was not aligned. There were all of these whispers saying that I was meant for something else, even though, what do you mean something else? This was supposed to be it. So there was a lot of conflict. And while you could look at my CV or my LinkedIn profile and see this successive rise of a career, and I looked like perfect on paper, what ended up happening is I was really perfectly miserable and needed to do the work because I'd fought for all those years. I'd fought for what I thought would make me happy. Because you get what you want. My mom said, you go fight for it. Well, I'd fought and it wasn't making me happy. So what would make me happy? And there was a big reconciliation there.
Why did you think that being at the top would be easier? Like, where did that thought come from? That's just because I'm interested. It's an interesting idea.
I just saw other people at the top and what looked so much easier for them. So I was comparing myself to others. I was comparing myself saying, well, if they can make it look easy, then I'm sure it'll be easy for me. And how do you even define the word easy?
Well, I was going to ask you, did you ever have conversations with those people that you were looking at to find out if it was, in fact, did it feel easy for them, or did they just make it look that way so you thought it was that way for them?
That's a really good question. And off the top of my head, my first thought is no, I didn't. I just looked at them and thought I wanted to role model who they were. But probably just like everybody behind closed doors, we're having, fights in our head about how difficult things are.
Yeah.
And I did think that at the C-suite, I'd be setting the vision and I'd be working on high level stuff. And then I would just delegate everything away. And that was not the recipe that was going to work.
Was that not the recipe that was going to work because of the industry, or because you just had a misconception around how it is up there?
That's another really good question. I think it was more about my expectation for the role, and it was sort of not in alignment. But I think it all came from those sort of the whispers of this isn't really what I should be doing. So it was making what I was doing more difficult.
Gotcha.
Even though I have to say, some of them, the irony, some of the biggest accomplishments in my career were the last several years in media. I mean, I did some absolutely amazing things, but those whispers and the nudges, they were there.
Yeah. So did you allow yourself to celebrate those wins, or did it feel like, okay, yeah, I did this, but I'm not really feeling fulfilled, so I'm not going to celebrate it?
I was working in an organization that was looking to build in more profitability. They were at a very low profit level. And that was my role as Chief Revenue Officer, was to create more profit. And when I took the job, I was told I would have complete autonomy. So I'm pretty self-directed, right? And we've talked about I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
So, and I also felt that I had the recipe. I had a recipe that I was proven in my 20 years at Martha Stewart, where there was lots of crisis, lots of up and downs, that I had learned enough there that I could take this recipe and create a difference. And what I learned when I got there was that I didn't have complete autonomy. And so that is why I work for myself now,
Yeah.
because I know what success looks like and I know I can create it. Now I'm creating it for myself instead of for somebody else. Because without that autonomy, I think that really really took the wind out of my sails.
Yeah, I can imagine it would, because if you're promised something and it's something as important as autonomy,
Yeah.
and then you don't get that, that's a big blow to your drive.
To
I'm not going to
drive
put as
to
much
like
into
my
it as
yeah, to drive to my expectations, to how I ended up showing up, like so much. And what's so interesting is while I was frustrated from that I wasn't given the autonomy, I didn't really recognize it until after I left. Awareness is so powerful.
Yeah. So you, right. It just felt uncomfortable, but you weren't really sure why. I think it's
Yes, exactly.
funny, just to back up for a second, I think it's funny that you used the term that you had the recipe and you were coming from Martha Stewart. I just,
Oh
I'm
my
in my
gosh,
head laughing at this over here.
I didn't even plan for that. That's a good one.
Yeah, you should use that again. Yeah. Okay, so how long were you at Fast Company, and what was the turning point where you went, all right, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I need to leave and go find
Oh,
what it
well,
is that I need to do, what my soul is telling me.
I probably would have liked to have made the decision myself.
Oh,
So I ended up getting I call it exiled because I think I like that. I was exiled from Fast Company. So Fast Company is owned by a company that's called Mansueto Ventures, and they also own the media brand Inc. So
right.
essentially, I worked on the business side, advertising and marketing. And they combined the two leadership divisions from both magazines into one. So the woman was exiled.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was good. I mean, when I look back on it, it gave me the time to say, okay, I did some really great things there. And I also was in a bit of conflict. So it gave me the time to say, okay, let's really do the work. Where was the conflict coming from? And what do you want to do next? And a lot of people thought I would just go and get another CRO job or big name job in the media business. And I loved media. It wasn't that I didn't love media. I just didn't love what I was doing. I cared less about the quarterly numbers and I cared more about the people and getting the people to see what they couldn't see for themselves and getting the people to see what they could see a little bit more clearly. So I was given the time to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And
You're
so it's a
talking about
gift.
the people on your team.
Yeah. And that had always worked for me. Like I knew I could lead very high performing teams. It was something that I'd done. So, I went from the dishwashing at 11, right? And I took a leadership role by 13. I was the manager of all the waitresses. I was, worked for Stewart Surveys in a management position when I was like 15 years old. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to be in the leadership role as much as I was driven to help others become their best. Stewart Surveys, you would make more money the more surveys you did. I would teach them how to do that. I would teach the waitresses like sort of how to make better tips.
Which plays to that whole idea of you don't have to have the title of leader to be a leader. You just do it, and then you're a leader.
Yeah, and it depends on like the word leadership has a lot of different definitions. Just what you said. I mean, you don't have to be the top dog to be a leader. It's more about influence. And like as I've worked to define success for myself, I say that I want to be successful. And those last three letters, I make them into four. I say successful, Full, and I want to be full of more ease, more joy, and more impact. So the impact, I don't have to be the leader to have impact. I can just do that by helping influence people, by helping support people, by helping being kind, right?
Yeah, everybody has the ability to do that. No matter what
Yeah.
your formal role is in life, we all have the ability to do that.
And just because I don't have the CRO title doesn't make me any less of a fighter.
Yeah. So you still identify very strongly with being a fighter.
I do. I think, as you asked me, like growing up, I think once it's ingrained in you, it's ingrained. And now I'd like to think that I fight for other people.
Yeah. Were you angry
And
when
I
you were
fight for
left?
myself. And I also fight for myself. Like, I'm a cancer survivor. So, going through AML treatment for a year, I had to do a lot of fighting and, kind of circling this all back to my story. So I was diagnosed with AML leukemia on April Fool's Day. It was no joke. And put into the hospital for this year-long treatment. And so when you think about having to fight for my survival, part of what I fought for was creating success. So part of what I fought for was a survival tactic, a fighter tactic, was I launched my new coaching business.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little bit more in a minute. First of all, how long after you left or you were exiled from Fast Company did you get that diagnosis? And the other question I was going to ask is, were you angry when they exiled you? Or did you immediately see it as an opportunity? Like the universe was giving you the opportunity that you had wanted but didn't know?
No, I mean, full transparency is that didn't come for a little bit,
Okay.
even though it really was the gift. When I was exiled, I was like, wait, you don't know. This is all coming around. This is all happening. There's so much more to do. So I think where my disappointment, my anger came from was, what a missed opportunity. Their letting me go felt like a missed opportunity because I knew we were like minutes away. I had made such an inroad. And of course, the quarter and the year after I left was one of the most successful years that brand had ever had because I had done all the right things to help the team come together to create a more successful enterprise. So I think it was more about like, it felt like a missed opportunity because I was so close. And it probably took me, a little bit to get over the disappointment. But I knew, being the fighter, right? I knew that there was something more for me out there.
Okay. So then how soon or how long after you left there did you get that diagnosis?
It was about a year later.
Okay. And what were you doing in that year span?
It's a good question. My husband and I we bought a local business. And we decided that we wanted to do something that we no longer wanted to commute to New York City, that we wanted to do something that was local, that was actually within the community, and we wanted to make that our next chapter. So we bought this existing business that had been going for 10 years, and when we took it over, we were actually drinking like from the fire hose, trying to figure out, how to run this local business. And I got this phone call and I knew, by the way, the whispers I was talking about earlier, the whispers were going louder and louder, like I've got to figure out what my purpose is. And, fine is not a 4-letter word, right? Oh, fine is a 4-letter word. I felt like
Absolutely.
purpose is like a 4-letter word too, right?
Yeah.
And, it was like, and I think for F's sake, I wanted to figure out what my purpose was. And I got a phone call from somebody who I'd worked with at Fast Company on my cell phone, and she said that she wanted to make sure that she reached out to me. I was one of the few people that she'd reached out to since she had had this horrible concussion, which put her behind closed doors for about a year because it was her ninth concussion.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
So she's like, I had a lot of time to think, and I wanted to reach out to you to let you know that you changed my life both professionally and personally. Why aren't you a coach? You have the ability to help people. I mean, it was crazy. And it sort of like kind of opened me up. It sort of cracked me open. It was like, I've been toying around. Like I would make fun of myself because on any given day working for Martha Stewart and all of the challenges and crises there, you could find me at the 46th Street Barnes and Noble in the self-help and personal development aisle. So I had this like sort of knack for the personal development, executive development, leadership development space. And so when she said it, a little bit cracked me open. And so I held my first workshop. It was a 4-hour workshop on how to lead your extraordinary life with 8 women. And I wasn't feeling well. 3 days later, I was diagnosed with leukemia.
Okay. Wow.
And so I felt a little robbed. Like I finally found my purpose, my effing purpose.
Right.
And I felt robbed. And so I didn't want to be robbed. So the fighter came out. I wanted to survive. And I also wanted to launch this business. And I'm not pounding my chest because it was a very difficult year. But me launching the business while I was getting treatment was a little bit of a survival tactic.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, that's some pretty brutal. I don't know if it was brutal. If brutal's the right word for the treatment. Yeah. And you're launching a business, which is difficult to say the least experience on top of that. So, yeah.
Brutal. But you know what? I came out and, one of the things I say to women right now is that like you don't want to wait for a health crisis. You don't want to wait for burnout and health issues to decide that you are deserving of more. And to give yourself permission, oftentimes, and I know we talked about this earlier, like we are, as women, we're told to like go to college and get that first job and get married, have kids, and then all of a sudden we're raising our kids and we look around one day and we're like, is this it? Is this it? And so, I wrote the book For Success' Sake, and I wrote it with that woman in mind. That this isn't it. We've got the rest of our life. We've got more than half of our life to live. And why not rediscover? If you have an itch for more, why not rediscover it now? Because when you're happy, your family, your husband, your friends will be happy because they're going to be seeing you happy.
Right. It's our responsibility to find our happiness in order to then radiate that out and spread that joy. So many people, and I've had so many guests, and I've heard it, because we read the same kind of books and listen to the same kinds of podcasts and stuff about not waiting for a crisis to make a change. Mm-hmm. And yet still, so many people are like, yes, I hear that, but they don't actually take it in, they don't actually follow it until there's a crisis. And so I think it was Dan Sullivan who has said, like, if you want your future to be bigger, better, happier, you have to be thinking about it bigger and better. Like, you have to be thinking about your future, not sometime off in the future. Mm-hmm. It's not out there. You have to start creating it today. And when you think about a bigger future, you start making decisions that are bigger and better. Right. So sometimes we keep thinking like the bank account has to be bigger, or we have to think about getting our kids to college before we can get decided around what we want. And if you just think about, for me, what worked is I just thought about what was possible for me in my future. What's possible when I'm happy? Who will I become when I give myself permission?
that I want to create something different.
That is the thing I love so much, is who will I become? I love
Who
that
will I
question,
become?
and asking that question of ourselves. And I've talked about that before on this show too. Who who would I like to be? Who would
Mhm.
I like to become? And stepping into that. And I'm also happy that you said it doesn't matter the size of your bank account, because I've had a lot of
Mhm.
conversations. This whole season has been focused around taking sabbaticals, or talking to people who have taken a sabbatical. And so many people I've heard from who've listened to these episodes are like, well, yeah, but I can't afford it.
Mhm.
And the question again is almost, well, how can you not afford it? Because you are suffering on
What is it
many
costing you?
levels. Yeah, what's it
What
costing
is
you?
it costing you to not get decided around what you deserve? So, like, people expected me to go back, stay in the media business, right? And I had expectations of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had so much judgment about becoming a coach. What would people think of me? And instead, I started saying, well, who would I become if I became a coach? Now,
Yeah.
you got to remember, I also had those what about the bank account?
Yeah.
What happens if I can't build a coach? What happens if I fail, right? So I had to say, well, who would I become if I had paying clients? So the whole notion of who I will become is something I write about in my journals all the time. So when I started writing the book, who will I become when I'm a book author? That was a really big one,
Well, I
because
like
I
that.
have written, I've got like 2 books. I wrote a book that I got lost on the computer, it got just corrupted. It was called From Martha to Mother. That was my first one. I wrote another book while I was in treatment. Neither one of these books have been published, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I kept saying, like, am I going to do this? So I finally think I decided to publish a book when I really did the work on who would I become when I did.
I love that. That is a great exercise for anyone
Mm-hmm.
listening to
Mm-hmm.
pull out a journal, or even just think about it. You don't have to write it down. Who will I become
So,
when I reach that ideal situation?
and you know what? Another prompt I use a lot is who will I become when I break my own glass ceiling?
Ooh, I like that.
We all have these glass ceilings. Like I've said it here on the podcast, like my glass ceiling, I was thinking, well, do I have to stay in the media business? I was thinking the media business was my ceiling. When in fact, I broke through that thought to become a coach. And who would I become by breaking the glass ceiling and actually publishing a book? Like, all of a sudden, when I wrote about it, I could see it. And as soon as I saw it, I couldn't unbecome it.
Yes, yes. It's that whole idea of I have to see it to believe it, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't always correct, because believing it before you see it is. Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Christina Langdon. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Lori, can you
I
hear
am
me?
really looking forward to this conversation. So let's jump right in
You're back.
and start with the question that I love asking people, which is, what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to making you who you became as a young adult, especially?
You're back. Okay.
Mm.
Good. And if not, we'll do it. We'll do it again. Wait, so Right. So building belief is one of the hardest things I haven't, we've talked about me being a fighter, but I've never believed in myself until recently. It really took a long time for me to build belief that I was the creator of my destiny, just like my mother was saying, right? And I finally started believing in myself after I did the work to, one of the quotes I say
we were
is,
talking in our
you are the biggest
show
influencer in
conversation.
your life.
I don't know if this came
and
up,
when you
but my
recognize
parents
your
got divorced when I was
influence
11
over
as well.
you, it's a game changer.
It's just, it's that
So
age
when
where
I
you're in
finally
between, like you're not a
started
kid, but you're
believing
learning about
myself,
stuff, and it's really
I
impressionable.
said, okay, how do
I
I
heard
want to
you say your
influence my
mom
life? And
taught
I
you
broke it
that
down
you
into
get
really
what you fight
small,
for.
easy, bite-sized steps.
So did you always feel
And
like you
I
had to fight
created
for
influence
everything
over
that
myself to create what I wanted.
you needed
And
to have?
looking at and thinking about and writing about, okay, where's the evidence of my belief? Where have I already created it? Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy have written a book that's called The Gap and the Gain. And they say that your success, you've already created your success. Your future success will come from your past success. So when I'm building belief, I look back on the success that I've created to see where I can pull from it to build belief about the future I want to create.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first place you have to start is defining what success looks like.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
And when you decide, when you actually define it, because most people don't. Most people spend more time planning vacations than they do defining what success looks like for them. Because we know it's not money, we know it's not things. It comes from a decision that you make about how you want to feel. So I work with my clients to help them build belief and find the evidence of what they can create
no responsibilities, and
so that they can believe in their results ahead of time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when you saw it,
I'm not saying that any of the
and when you saw it, what changed for you? What was
different?
different?
Back and go, I wish it had been different, necessarily, because it did make us who we are. So then, how did that outlook
Isn't that amazing?
serve you or not serve you as you started getting into a career?
Mm-hmm. I had my first coach when I was back at working at Martha Stewart, and she was really out there. And I resisted at first. And when I started realizing, why am I resisting? The company's paying for this coach. How about embracing it? What would it look like if I embraced it? So I coached myself on being coached by this crazy coach. And she was amazing. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh, but it really was like, oh, look what she's doing. She's changing people's lives. So that sort of gave me like a little bit of an appetite for it. But when I did the work on myself, I was so tired of myself. That's the other thing. Stop waiting till you just get so tired of yourself, to start believing in yourself. So I did the work. I went back and got certified in leadership coaching. I got certified in emotional intelligence. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of podcasts.
Right. Well, after I get to the top, I don't have to fight as hard.
And created sort of my own frameworks for, okay, I'm going to take what other people are saying and how am I going to apply that to what I want to create for myself? So, is a fighter good or bad? What do I think about fighting, right? What do I think about being a fighter? How has being a fighter served me? How has a fighter not served me? When I think about why was I perfectly miserable in the C-suite? Was it because I wasn't a good leader? No. But when I got exiled, sure, there were all the thoughts of I did something wrong or I was bad, like, we shame and blame ourselves, right? And no, I found the evidence of what I had accomplished. And from that evidence, I was like, okay, I accomplished a lot, but I want to do more instead of the blame and shame. So I kind of put myself into my own like personal development MBA.
Why did you think that being at the top would be easier? Like,
Yeah.
where did that
Yeah.
thought come from? That's just because I'm interested. It's an interesting idea.
And if you're going to work with a coach, you got to make sure that that coach is a product of their own product, right? So I coach a lot of people in the C-suite. I coach a lot of chief executives and founders because I've been a chief executive. I've done it. And we need to
Well,
be
I
a
was going to ask you,
product
did you ever
of our
have conversations
products.
with those people that you were looking at to find out if it
Yeah.
was, in fact, did it feel easy for them, or did they just make it look that way so
Exactly.
you thought it
Exactly.
was that way for them? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now that I've published the book, like I've sort of become, so now I have to figure out who I'm going to become from there.
Was that
And
not the recipe that was going to work because of
I
the
am
industry,
very,
or
very
because you
excited
just had a
because I want to
misconception
be able to
around
scale
how it
my
is up
work.
there?
And I want to be able to create more impact doing less. Now, I'm a fighter and I work really hard, but I do want to reclaim more ease and joy. So I'm actually redefining what success looks like for me so that I can have more impact, which means I have to scale, right? Somehow scale with less
Gotcha.
time. And so that's a work in progress that I'm working towards. But what I know, because I love what just came up to me when you asked me this question, is fine is a 4-letter word, right? And
Yeah.
I
So
won't
did
sit
you
in
allow
fine
yourself to
because
celebrate
I'm a
those
fighter,
wins?
right?
Or
I'm a
did
high
it feel
performance
like,
coach, right?
okay,
And
yeah, I
when we
did this,
say
but
we're
I'm not really
fine,
feeling
that's
fulfilled, so I'm not going to
generally
celebrate it?
a sort of a flashing light that I want to do more work on myself. So my business right now is fine. It's doing so well. But that itches, maybe that's the whispers again saying, what's next? Who will I become next when I've scaled and created more impact?
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like if I'm just like, so when you think about it, somebody asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, where's my life right now? And my life's it's pretty good. I've survived cancer. I've survived like getting job loss, right? I've survived starting a company and doing well. So I'm at like 8, 9, dare I say 10. And so a coach said to me, what if you were at a 2? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
If this feels so good at a 2, what will I do for the 10? Fun, right?
Yeah, I can imagine it would, because if you're promised something, and it's something as important as autonomy, and then you don't get that, that's a big blow to your um, drive. Like, I'm not going to put as much into it as
Yeah, and I don't want to be Pollyanna. Like, life is 50-50, right? We have good days and we have bad days. And I have plenty of bad days. Just my bad days are a little more joyful than they were when I was sort of perfectly miserable. But so, what an exercise I'm working on as I become my next self is
Yeah.
I'm going to
So
become a student
right.
again.
It just felt uncomfortable, but
So
you
I'm
weren't
going to
really sure
tear
why.
down all of my
I think it's
business, and I'm
funny,
saying that a
just
little
to
bit,
back up for a second. I think it's funny that
not
you used
literally,
the
but
term
I want to become a
that you
student of
had
my
the
business
recipe
again. I
and
want
you
to
were
become a
coming from
student
Martha
of my
Stewart.
product
That's-
again. I
I'm
want
in
to
my head laughing at
relook
this
at
over
everything
here.
through the eyes of being a student. If I had to create it
Yeah, you
all
should use
over
that again.
what would it look like now?
Yeah.
And so I just
Okay, so
started on this new project.
How long were you
yesterday.
at Fast Company, and what was the turning point where you went, all right,
The
this
student
isn't what I
mindset
thought it
is
was
where
going to
the
be.
growth is.
I need
And
to
so
leave
becoming, when you're
go find
becoming, you're
find
growing.
what it is that I need to do.
So
what
I
my
want
soul
to
is telling me.
like embrace the student mindset again to see where the growth
Oh.
is.
Yes. Right.
My hype song is "This Is Me," and it's from the movie The Greatest Showman. And if you pull it up or listen to it, I want you to listen to it with the video.
Okay.
And not the video of the one where she's doing it in the movie, but the video of when they're practicing it. It's on YouTube. And so anytime I want to like give a great workshop or I'm giving a talk, I typically put it on there because this is me. I'm not perfect. I have plenty of warts. I have plenty of weaknesses, and I am who I am. I oftentimes say like I've got all the certifications and whatnot. I've gone to college. I've been in the C-suite, but I'm not an expert in any of it. The only thing I'm really an expert in is myself. And so this is me.
You're talking about the people on your team.
Well, you can find me on my website, which is christinalangdon.com. But if you want to continue the conversation, you can subscribe to my newsletter. I put out a newsletter that's called Sunday Sunshine, and it comes out on Sundays because oftentimes we get the Sunday scaries when we're thinking about the work week ahead. And so I drop a message into your email every Sunday to help you think about creating the work week ahead that you want. So you can subscribe on the website, and you can find me on Instagram at Christina Langdon Boss Lady.
Which plays to that whole idea of you don't have to have the title of leader to be a leader.
Oh, great.
You
I
just
love
do
that.
it, and then you're a leader.
Oh, Lori, this was so much better than fine.